This episode of The Patrick Coffin Show is brought to you by our upcoming May 17th through 25th, 2020 pilgrimage to Germany. Our spiritual director is the great Father Willie Raymond. He's running the canonization cause for Father Patrick Peyton, famous for the family that prays together, stays together. We're going to Munich, Regensburg, Dachau, into Austria to Salzburg to see where The Sound of Music was filmed, and it all culminates at the Oberammergau Live Passion Play, which only happens every decade. So if you want to come with us, seats are selling out. So patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. Bucket list item, Catholic Germany pilgrimage. Love to have you aboard. Okay, the crisis in our culture and in the church often comes down to a crisis of leadership. Our leaders, in so many ways, have failed us. What is leadership? Can you break down leadership into principles? Is there a system to understand the difference between a great leader, a mediocre one, and a corrupt one? Well, the answer is yes. We're going to talk about aretology today with Alexandre Havard, and he's here shortly after these quick words. This is the Patrick Coffin Show on leadership. As promised, Alexandre Havard is the founder of the Virtuous Leadership System. He was born and raised in Paris and graduated from the Paris Descartes University. He's been an attorney all across Europe. His books include Virtuous Leadership, Created for Greatness, and his new book is called From Temperament to Character. They've been translated into 20 or so languages. Alexandre Havard joins us from Moscow. Alex, welcome back.
Welcome, Patrick.
Last time you and I spoke, it was for the Coffin Nation members only. We talked about the four Greek classic temperaments, and you and I have spoken before about magnanimity and created for greatness. All of these virtues with respect to leadership, they all kind of co-inhere and feed each other, right? They're sort of organically united.
Yeah, all the virtues are connected to one another. We know this since ancient time. The more you develop one virtue, the more you develop the others. So fighting, struggling to develop fortitude, you at the same time, of course, develop the virtue of self-control, the virtue of prudence, the virtue of how do you call this?
What is it in Francais?
Justice.
Justice. Oh yeah, giving the other his due, right?
Yeah.
And let's start with one that's one of the more misunderstood virtues, especially with regard to leadership, and that's meekness. People think meekness now is it kind of connotes a wimp, a floor mat. I'm just a little worm. You know, I'm shy. I'm a Casper milquetoast. But what's the connection between meekness and greatness, or between meekness and self-control?
Well, I think the virtue of meekness is, of course, a virtue, but we need to understand it well. I mean, there is a time for meekness, and there is a time for wrath. You know, the opposite of meekness is wrath, anger. And we live in a society where I think there should be a lot of anger, because things are not going the way we want. We see the values that are the values of our society today are not necessarily the values we would like to have. So we see many people, especially in certain Christians, I would say a lot of meekness, but maybe not enough wrath. And you know, wrath is a very important thing. It's there is something as just wrath, good wrath, righteous. We call this righteous wrath, which when you're facing an injustice, you understand that you have to have wrath, because it's not good to be meek when you are in a situation of injustice. And wrath acts on audacity, boldness, courage. So the importance of passions are here. You have to have passions if you want to practice the virtue of audacity, courage, boldness. So it's good to be meek when you have to be meek. But when you're facing situations of very rash injustice, then you have to have the virtue of anger, the righteous anger that helps you practice the virtue of audacity, boldness, and courage.
How do you distinguish righteous anger or wrath with anger as one of the 7 deadly sins? I think Christians particularly misunderstand the emotion of anger. They sort of see it as a kind of morally tainted part of being human.
Well, the way to understand this is just to look at the life of Jesus Christ. when he was driving away the businessman from the temple, he practiced wrath. He practiced wrath, and we see that's a good wrath. It's a wrath in front of an injustice, and this is I think there is a kind of wrath which comes from lack of love for people, which comes from pride, which comes from envy. You know, when you feel envy, at the same time you feel a certain wrath, and this wrath, of course, is not righteous. It's bad, it's an evil wrath, and you have to fight against it. But the good wrath, the one that comes from a situation of injustice, is very positive. Just remember, many people, I don't know, for instance, Martin Luther King, it's out of wrath that he became a doer, that he did the things he did. Many people are become great people because they are facing situations of injustice, and this produces in them a powerful wrath that helps them act and do the thing that they have to do.
I was speaking a few months ago with Dr. Suzanne Bars, whose father, you may have heard of Dr. Conrad Bars, a psychiatrist who was in concentration camp for 18 months before he was liberated. And Suzanne said that her father, he ended up becoming a famous Catholic psychiatrist, wrote books on emotional health and so on. And he said what kept him alive in that camp was the anger against the Nazi guards. His spirit fed on that righteous anger. 1,000 men went in on a train and only 6 came out, and Dr. Bars was one of them. I thought that was very interesting insight, because it wasn't the desire for blood revenge. He didn't want to harm them, but he hated them. He hated what they were doing, and that he sort of nurtured that anger. Does that make sense? Does that fit in here with what you're saying?
Yeah, what makes sense is not anger against people. It's against their deeds. We as Christians will always have to make a difference between the sinner and the sin. So a Christian never feels wrath or anger against people. He feels anger against the sin or injustice committed by human beings. We'll always try to save the person. And in order to save the person, we have to show him the evil of what he's doing. But the sinner is one thing, and the sin is something else. So the wrath needs to be directed not against the person, but fundamentally against the actions that person commits.
That's the rub, isn't it? The distinguishing them, because it can be hard to distinguish them.
It's not easy to do it, but a Christian has really to do the thing. We cannot hate people. We can hate actions that they are doing, but we cannot feel any hate for human beings. We need to feel mercy, try to understand them also sometimes, try to understand why they became what they became. Just think of a man like Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
Christian, you cannot feel wrath against him. What you can feel is wrath against the things he was doing. Because the more you understand the guy, the more you know the person, the more you understand that he became like this fundamentally because his father was beating him every day when he was young. So it's always possible to justify someone, try to understand why such a person became like this. Of course, you understand that freedom is a reality. We are not determined by our education. We are not products of our education.
Yeah.
We are products of a temperament. We are not products of society. But those things have an influence on us. And we as Christians, we have to be able to make the difference between those two things, because this is the only way to help people become better and change and convert, is to understand that we love them, that we hate what they are doing.
Yeah, that's there it is right there. Repent and believe. It's hard to point out people's faults without them taking offense. I mean, human nature is pretty allergic to being told that what we're doing, what we're doing is wrong. One thing I love about your approach in your books, Alex, is that you don't just point out bad leadership and condemn it. You have models of good leadership. Who are the top handful of let's say political or social leaders that you would hold up as models of magnanimity and meekness and fortitude?
Well, there are many, of course. There are many. I used to speak a lot about my friend Jérôme Lejeune.
Jérôme Lejeune, right? Yeah. Tell
French
people. Sure.
geneticist, who discovered the cause of Down syndrome in 1958, and he was fighting all his life in order to explain people from a scientific point of view what's human life and when human life begins.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a real social leader. He was a leader in the field of science because he was all the time speaking as a scientist, not as a moralist or a theologian. And he was speaking the whole truth. And it was very hard for him to speak the truth because that truth, people didn't want to hear it. But he spoke it until the very last day of his life, and he died the day of Easter, 1994.
Mm.
And on his tomb, it's written Nika. Nika means victory in Greek. These are the only words that are there. And when the Pope John Paul II was in France in the 1990s, he went to see his friend. He went to see the tomb of his friend to be with him, to speak to him. So this is one guy that I think was a real leader in the field of science. Then in the field of politics, there are many, I think there are many people that really can be considered as real leaders in politics. I think about Joan of Arc, who was a great French woman.
Yeah.
I think Ronald Reagan was also a real leader because he was a man of truth. He was speaking the truth. He was not afraid of the truth. He was very much influenced by his mother, who was a great woman. He copied the character of his mother. He was a man of truth. He was saying things as he saw it. Of course, all those political leaders make mistakes, and each one of us, we don't agree necessarily with everything they've done. But one thing is what the guy has done, another thing is the character of the person. Mm-hmm. This man, I think, has a very strong character, and he was a powerful leader. I'm convinced of that. These are political leaders and social leaders. Maybe Martin Luther King was a social leader, but I think he had character. Many things, of course, in his way of behaving maybe are not very, very correct from a Christian point of view, but you cannot say he had no character. He was a man who tried at least to practice the virtues, and at least to practice the virtue of magnanimity. So these people had a dream, and they tried to implement that dream, and they implemented it with fortitude, courage, with audacity, and this is what leadership is about.
How about Alexandre Solzhenitsyn? Tell us about your history with him, another leader.
Yeah. Alexandre Solzhenitsyn is also one of them, and he's an interesting person because he was fighting against communism during years because he understood it was evil. But at the same time, when he was sent to exile and he went to America, he didn't become a slave of the American system. People were expecting that at Harvard he would criticize the Soviet Union and would say nothing about America. But his speech was about the decline of courage in the United States and in Europe and in the West in general. He was a man who was always trying to say the truth. He was not, you couldn't buy that guy. And I think this is this is powerful, this is courage, the capacity to stay the course, the capacity not to surrender to ideologies, the capacity to look for the truth and to speak it. Mm-hmm. I knew very well Alexandre Solzhenitsyn. I spent time with him when he was here in Moscow before he died.
How did you meet him? What was the first encounter with him?
That first encounter with him was some 15 years ago. I mean, he passed away 10 years ago, but that was 15 years ago. But that was 5 years before he died, and he was still in good health. And he was very happy of what he had done. Leaders are always happy because they understand they have fought the right fight. And this gives them a lot of peace and a lot of joy. So I was honored to be with him and to listen to him and to listen to me. And he was happy to see that people like me, third generation of Russians living in Europe, coming back to Russia to help Russia. So he loved his country very much. He hated communism, but he loved Russia. This is something that many people in the West don't understand. How can you love Russia and hate communism? The thing is
Yeah.
that Russia was the first victim of communism, and he understood those things very well.
My mentor, Archbishop Sheen, had a great love for the Russian people and a hatred of communism. He could recite the communist, the Soviet constitution. He knew it by heart, but he had a great love for the Russian people. So it's possible to distinguish, again, back to the sin versus sinner dynamic. My friend and guest Jordan Peterson has obviously been influenced greatly by Solzhenitsyn. He quotes him quite a lot. There's something universal, isn't there, about true leaders? You can kind of see the ring of truth in their willingness to pay willing to pay the cost of what, because telling the truth is not popular. There is a cost to be paid. There's going to be backlash. There's going to be opposition.
Yeah, I think in true leaders you see always those two things, the specific virtues of leaders that are magnanimity and humility. Mm-hmm. You see the dream. You see the transformation of the dream into mission, and you see the service to humanity. So you see both magnanimity, which is striving of the spirit towards great things, that's the dream, and transformation of the dream into action. And you see the service to the others. These people are servants of humanity. Mm-hmm. When you just have a dream but there is no service, it's hard to call this leadership. There should be both things, because leaders, in the end of the day, are people who achieve greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. You know, they inspire people, and when you inspire people, you elevate people, you bring them to greatness. You don't achieve greatness just for yourself. You help people achieving greatness. Mm-hmm. So there is always you and the others. You have to have a sense of your personal dignity. You have to have a sense of what you want to achieve in your life. A sense of greatness, that is a sense of growth. At the same time, understanding that you do this, you achieve this greatness, that growth, when you help others achieving that growth and that greatness. So it's you have two things, you and the others. Greatness for yourself, greatness for the others. This is the best service you can render humanity. And this is what true leadership is about.
Could you say that the shadow side of greatness, or the temptation that can come with it, is a sense of ego stroking and enlargement of self at the expense of others? Is that the temptation?
It's pride, and then
pride. Yeah.
You don't have the virtue of prudence. You don't understand what greatness is about, what magnanimity is about. So if you have no prudence, you can misunderstand it, and you can think that it's about pride. I think there is no problem when you understand very well your talents, when you understand your personal greatness, but when you at the same time understand that this is a gift from God. When you understand that all those great things that you have in yourself are here because God has given them to you, then there is no temptation of pride. You know, mm-hmm. you have the magnanimity of understanding that you have talents, and you have the humility to understand that those talents have been given to you by God. They are not yours. They are not the product of your personal activity. And if you have those two things clear in your mind and in your heart, then magnanimity and humility will go hand in hand.
Is a synonym for magnanimity greatness of heart?
Yeah, great-heartedness, high-mindedness. Mm-hmm. These are different words for magnanimity. Mm-hmm. The magnanimity word comes from the Latin word magnanimitas, which was coined in the year 44 before Jesus Christ by the famous Cicero. Mm-hmm. It was a translation from the Greek word megalopsychia. Megalopsychia means big soul.
I was just saying that word this morning. No, just kidding. Erotology, the study of virtue. That's an interesting etymology there as well. What's the root of erotology?
Well, for the ancient Greeks, arete was what we call in English virtue. So for the ancient Greek, arete was a quality of the human person. So the ancient Greek has the vision that the more virtues you have, the more you are a human being, because mm-hmm. these are human virtues. They make you human. That's why they were used to say, become who you are, or mm-hmm. become what you are. That you were born a human being, but to be a human being is a process. Also, it's not just something you're born with. Humanity is something you have to develop, and you develop it by developing the virtue of the different virtues. So for the ancient Greeks, arete was what we call now virtue. But the Romans, they changed the word arete, or they translated the word arete into virtus, because for them virtus was power, energy. I mean, the Romans were very pragmatical people, and they understood that virtue is not just the quality of being, it is also the capacity of action. So that's why they use the word virtus, and virtus means just this, energy, power. It's the capacity to do certain things. Prudence gives you the capacity to make the right decisions. Self-control, the capacity to control, to direct your emotions. Magnanimity, the capacity to strive for great things. Humility, the capacity to serve others. Courage, the capacity to stay the course, the capacity to take risks. So the Romans understood that these virtues, those arete, are not just beautiful qualities of the human spirit. They also are capacities for action. I think Americans like it because they love action.
Yeah, that's true. Pragmatic, action-oriented, results-oriented leadership. Yeah. How does fortitude differ from audacity?
Well, the thing is that normally the virtue of courage, this is the way we use it now. We say that courage is two things. Courage is active courage, that is boldness or audacity, and passive courage. And passive courage, that is the capacity to stay the course, and we call this persistence or endurance. So you see in courage you have two things, a passive aspect and an active aspect of it, and both are very important in leadership. Both, I would say even the passive aspect of courage is probably more important. It's more difficult to stay the course during years and decades than during 5 minutes to do an act of audacity.
Could you say that, I'm thinking of young saints who, like Joan of Arc or Saint Maria Goretti, they were capable of great heroism, but that wasn't an impulsive thing. That was the fruit of the stick-to-itiveness, the perseverance for a long period of time that enabled them to do these outstanding acts before they died. And in these two cases, it led to their martyrdom. That reminds me of when we speak of celebrities who were overnight successes, but then you read the backstory and they've been doing it for 20 years, and suddenly something happens and they go from being unknown to very well known. I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that these virtues have to be acquired over time. They're not born with them in a prepackaged sense. You have to cooperate with grace, and it's hard work over time.
Well, of course, the virtue of endurance, virtue of courage, is something you develop since you're very young by making acts of courage in little things. So Jesus tells us in the gospel, if you've been faithful in little things, you will be faithful in big things. So it means that you don't become courageous from one day to another one. People become courageous, persistent. They have been practicing this in little things since they were very young. We have to help children practice courage. We have to help them strengthen their will in little things, just doing the things they have to do till the end. The practice courage is to every day do your job and finish it before doing something else. It's persistence in the good, persistence in the thing you're doing. It's about sanctification of your professional job. If you try to do everything well till the end, till the last detail, then you practice the virtue of courage.
I was thinking as you were talking about, back to Dr. Jérôme Lejeune, he won this Allen Prize in Science, and then he spoke out very boldly against abortion because his sort of medical charges, his spiritual children, people with Down syndrome, are to this day in the crosshairs of the abortion industry. And I remember reading that he wrote today to his wife. He said, "Today I lost my Nobel Prize in medicine," because he knew that would be kept from him for the rest of his life. That's a cost he was willing to pay, correct?
Yeah, exactly. He knew where he was going. He knew he was going to lose Nobel Prize. He knew he was going to lose his money. his finances. He knew he was going to lose his esteem. He knew he was going to become a beggar all his life in order to go on with his investigations. But he did it. That's why he is a real hero.
Mm-hmm.
He was not afraid of the truth, and his colleagues in America didn't like him because he spoke the truth. And it was not the moment to speak the truth, but he was not afraid of it. It was 1969, so just after the famous Cultural Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So we were not ready to hear him. But he spoke the truth like Jesus Christ, and he was crucified like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. That's
Mm-hmm.
why he's a martyr. And of course he will be canonized.
He's servant of God now, I understand.
Yes, he is.
And you knew him.
I knew him quite well, yeah, because he's a Frenchman like me, and we met in Paris many times. I invited him to Finland, to Sweden, to give speeches there, because I knew him well, and he came. And the last time I invited to Estonia, but he couldn't because he was already ill, and he passed away a few years after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he died the day of Easter, which is God's grace, the Sunday of Easter.
I've never seen a photo of Dr. Lejeune in which he didn't look filled with childlike joy. There was always a kind of a twinkle in his eye, like he was keeping this great secret.
Yeah, he was a very quiet person.
Mm-hmm.
He had a phlegmatic temperament, and this helped him very much to speak very quietly. Every time he was on TV, he was speaking so quietly that he was very convincing. That's why one day the media decided, out of conspiracy, not to invite him anymore to speak on TV, because he was convincing everyone.
Keep the leper away.
Yes, yeah, the guy was convincing because he was quiet, he was scientific, he was loving, he loved people. He hated sin, but he loved people. He understood them. He understood them very well. So he was a public danger for the pro-death people.
Because his opposition to the pro-death ideology was not based on Jesus, Bible, counsel, revelation, but rooted in science. And as a man of science, he had great credibility, which made him all the more dangerous.
That's why he was always saying those words, if one day the church says that an embryo is not a human being, I will have to leave the church because I'm a scientist, and science abhors obscurantism.
That's powerful.
That's powerful, but this is science. This is a dialogue. These are words of a scientist, and that's why people hated him, because he spoke as a scientist, not as a theologian or a moralist or a metaphysician. So this is a natural science.
Now, as you mentioned phlegmatic, you and I have spoken about the four classic temperaments. I'm very fascinated by the temperaments and your treatment of them as the beginning of leadership and character. If he had been a sanguine in his temperament, he probably would have spoken rather differently on television, but he was a phlegmatic. So maybe you can summarize for us the four classic temperaments beginning with phlegmatic, and because the phrases don't have wide currency like they should. So what are the four temperaments?
Well, you remember the four temperaments, that the first is called the choleric. Choleric people
choleric
are born managers. These are doers. Action is for them very important. No self-realization without action. So they are people always on the move, always doing things. Entrepreneurs, doers, managers. These are people they are born like this. Action is the word that characterizes them. Then you have the
let's pause there just for a moment. A couple of examples of famous cholerics. Teddy Roosevelt.
Joan of Arc was a choleric.
Joan of Arc.
She was a choleric. St. Paul.
St. Paul.
Was a choleric, obviously.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a choleric. Yeah, it's obvious. So, and then you have the melancholic people. The melancholic are people that are, it's not action that they need. They need an idea. They are idealistically minded. They want ideas or one idea for their lives. They are introvert people. They are very contemplative. They are the artists. They are not the doers. but there are people who go against the status quo. There are people that have new ideas, um, painters, musicians, all those writers, poets, all those people are fundamentally melancholics. So they are powerful. They are people in the ideas, and they have in their lives what we call self-absorption, which they are self-absorbed by their emotions, by their sentiments, by their feelings. And this can be a good or a bad thing, but this is what produces really great ideas and beautiful pieces of art. Then
just on a melancholic for a moment, it doesn't mean sad. We think, someone's melancholic, yeah.
There is a certain sadness in melancholy, because a melancholic is someone in the background of his life. There is perfection, the ideal. So he perceives everything from that point of view. So compared to the ideal, everything looks a little bit not ideal. You see what I mean?
I see, yeah.
So there is
perpetual dissatisfaction in a sense.
They're unsatisfied with what they do, what people do, and that's why there is certain sadness. There is what we call nostalgia. You know, they have a nostalgia of a lost world, and they want to go back to that world as soon as possible. It's the world where everything is perfect.
Right.
So it's because they are idealistically minded.
Famous melancholics of history?
St. John.
St. John.
St. John the Evangelist was a melancholic. John Paul II was a melancholic. Martin Luther King was a melancholic.
So Charles Dickens?
Maybe. Dickens also. Dostoevsky, all those great Russian writers were melancholic. So they have been also, there have been a lot of melancholics also in leadership. That's not a problem. It's not an obstacle. If you develop the virtue that can compensate the defects of melancholy, you can become an incredible person. But now we're speaking about the qualities of those people. Yeah. And then you have the sanguine. The sanguine person is a communicator. Is someone who is born as a communicator, as someone who loves people. He loves to be loved also by people. He is always he looks for he likes games. He likes entertainment. He likes to enjoy human nature. And you have a lot of people like this in communication. They're very good at that. And an example can be, for instance, King David.
King David, yeah.
King David was a sanguine person, obviously, and so their quality is the communication side. Their weakness may be their perseverance, because very often the sanguine people they understand what's happening now. They don't think about tomorrow. They don't think about yesterday. What's important for them is now. To enjoy life now, what French people call la joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre.
Yeah, it's typical of the sanguine, and
definitely me, Patrick Coffin, through and through. Yeah, I'm a sanguine with choleric tendencies. I think most people are sort of they dominate in one, right? But with like a wingman, there's a sort of a minor chord of another temperament. Is that
Well, you have a dominant temperament and a secondary temperament. John Paul II was a melancholic choleric. He was fundamentally melancholic, but there is a part of cholerism also in his temperament. And then after you have the phlegmatic. The phlegmatic, these are people who have a very rational, scientific approach of life. And you find a lot of engineers among them, a lot of people of science among them, very peaceful. For them, the key word is peace. For the sanguine, the key word is people, For the phlegmatic, the keyword is peace. They are dispassionate, very calm. They are scientifically minded, and that's a good aspect of their life. Maybe the defects that they have is that they like the status quo, they like routine, they don't want changes. They have difficulties to dream because the dream is not scientific. So we have to help them dream a little bit more. But you've had in America very important phlegmatic that have been wonderful businessman. Just think about Darwin Smith. who was the CEO during 25 years of Kimberly-Clark in the 1970s.
Yeah.
It's because of him that Kimberly-Clark became what it is. This guy was really a doer. So he was a phlegmatic that has a very strong character. He had boldness. He had magnanimity. He developed all those qualities. So, the temperament that you have shows you what's your natural, native qualities are. And at the same time, it shows you what's going to be the virtue that is going to be a challenge for you. And the virtue that you have to develop, absolutely, if you have this kind of temperament. If not, you will collapse as a human being. The choleric, they have to develop humility in order to serve people and not to serve themselves. And if they don't do this, they will collapse as people, and they will be managers, but they will never be leadership in their lives. The melancholic, they need to develop the virtue of audacity. They need to get outside of themselves. They need to take risks. They need to go to people. They need to stop being with themselves all the time. If not, they become very strange people, and there is no leadership in their lives. There's no service. There is no leadership. And if you're sanguine, you understand that the perseverance, patience, loyalty, faithfulness, these are going to be virtues that are going to be a challenge for you. And if you develop them, you will become a magnificent person. If you don't do it, you will collapse as a human being. And the phlegmatic have to develop the virtue of magnanimity, which is the virtue of dreamers. They have to dream more. They have to transform their dreams into action, into mission. If not, their lives they are going to collapse as people. So you see the importance of the temperament, because the temperament helps you understand what's your strength, what's your weaknesses, and what's next in terms of virtues. Temperament themselves are not so important. What's important is what's next. How do you help yourself, and how do you help people knowing that they have this temperament?
So these temperaments are the naturally preferred mode of operation, right? They're not moral or immoral. They're just factual. They describe preferences and kind of natural dispositions, but along with those come a kind of shadow side, or as you say, a deficit that has to be filled in with a virtue. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, it's the temperament. It's a way of being. That God wants for people. So if you're a sanguine, it's because God wanted you to be like this. If you're a melancholic, it's because God wants you to be melancholic. So these are gifts from nature, gifts from God. It's a way of being that is innate, and you must not change it. You must love yourself the way you are, physiologically, biologically speaking. And then after, you have to understand that you have some weaknesses. Having that temperament, there are also weaknesses that come with it. Yeah. And then you have to compensate those weaknesses by developing specific virtues. So not each one of us has to develop the same virtues. It's by developing the virtue that is a challenge for you that you become a magnanimous person. But your challenging virtue is not necessarily the same challenging virtue as it is for me.
Is it possible to diagnose oneself as self-describe, or is it better that your spouse or your best friend tell you who you are?
Because you have to get to know yourself well. When you know well the sense of temperaments, you understand quite easily who you are, and what's your predominant temperament and what's the secondary temperament. But it's also good to ask friends who know also this signs of temperament to help you correct a vision that you could have of yourself that is false. So it's good to know yourself well, but you also have to ask people around. But there are many things that shows you quite rapidly, quickly, what's your real temperament.
How would you describe yours?
Well, I am like John Paul II. I am a melancholic cleric. Melancholic because that is obvious. I like to write. I like to think. I need a lot of time for myself. I cannot be with people all the time. I become crazy.
Yeah.
So I am the opposite of the sanguine. But at the same time, there is a part of colorism that I inherited from my mother, in which I like to see things done. It's not. I want to see results. I don't want to be just with ideas all the time. But without ideas, I die. So that's it. So
Yeah.
it's good. It's a good mixture, and like all the mixtures are good.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. They're all good. It's just which flavor of good are you, so to speak. Alex, could you say that that our Lord Jesus Christ manifested all four? He was the perfect balance of all four temperaments.
Well, Jesus Christ is very it's a mystery.
Mm.
We know that Jesus was a perfect man, so there was perfection everywhere. So almost impossible to know the temperament of Christ, because in very different situations he behaves with the qualities of each temperament.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when he was throwing those guys from the temple, those businessmen, he really looks as a choleric. I don't think that a phlegmatic would have been able to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
you see cholerism within him. Then when he's praying on Holy Thursday, this typical prayer of melancholy. You know, it comes back all the time to the main topic. This is typical St. John. This is even St. John who, in the way, teaches for us that prayer. St. John was the guy who could picture it,
Mm-hmm.
because he was praying the same way as Jesus was praying. Then Jesus was spending a lot of time with the sinners, and he liked to be with them, and he enjoyed their presence. This is something typical of a sanguine, love, la joie de vivre, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not only with saints, but also with sinners.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that Jesus was capable of achieving, and this is remarkable in his life. And then when they brought to him the woman caught in adultery, the way the way he didn't say anything, he just write out stuff on the floor to remember.
Mm-hmm.
He's a peaceful, says nothing. And then cleric cannot be like this. Sanguine cannot be like that. It has to be, it is a manifestation of phlegmatism.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's impossible to know the temperament of Christ, because he was so perfect then that he could overcome quite easily all the defects of all the temperaments. Mm-hmm. So in the end of the day, you don't know you cannot say what was the temperament of Jesus Christ. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's a very unplumbable mystery. As you were talking, Alex, I was thinking about Saint Joseph and the temperament he was probably action-oriented. He doesn't say anything, but he's always protecting, he's leading, he's going, he's traveling. Maybe that's not unanswerable. Have you ever thought about St. Joseph, temperament-wise?
Yeah, we don't know. St. Joseph could have been very well also phlegmatic, but he had so much character, he had so much power, he had been developing magnanimity and fortitude so much that he became a man of action. Like Darwin Smith in America. Darwin Smith was a phlegmatic, but he was also a man of action. Mm-hmm. I think it's difficult to know only through what is pictured in the gospel to discover the temperament of Saint Joseph. I think it's not possible. We don't have enough information about him.
Not enough data.
We see his virtues very easily, but we don't see his temperament.
Yeah. Are great leaders born or made?
Well, if magnanimity and humility are the specific virtues of leaders, then leaders are made. They are not born. You're not born a leader. You can be born a manager, for instance. If you're a cleric, you're born a manager. Obviously, management and leadership are very different things. To manage things is to bring things forward, but to lead is to lead people. It's to bring people forward. That's something that requires a lot of virtues. So nobody is born a leader. You become a leader. It's a moral exercise. It's a spiritual exercise. So that's why you have every one of us can become a leader. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is very much a way of being.
Could you say that a leader inspires by example and motivates people for their own reasons, whereas a manager is the one who sets policy and kind of gives orders, not in a tyrannical sense, but the one who sets the rules, if you will?
Well, I think a manager is the one who is capable of setting goals and achieving those goals. And that's why we pay them a lot of money. They have a certain know-how to achieve the goals. But the leader, he knows that people are more important than things. So he will never sacrifice his people for a cause, for a goal. He will always try to make them grow, to elevate them, to make them leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So the priority in leadership are human beings. The human beings are an end in itself. And the goals, material goals, are not an end in itself. They have to be at the service of human beings. So a real leader is someone that always thinks about people. He thinks about his people. But for him, the greatness of human beings is more important than to achieve very high material results for himself or for the organization.
In the chapter on leadership and self-fulfillment, you talk about rules-based ethics and the pitfalls of rules-based ethics. What's that getting at?
We live in a society where there are many rules, and people say, well, I am a good man because I observe the rules. And this is a misunderstanding, this is a lie. I mean, to observe the rules is something basic, that is for children. You have to teach young people to observe the rules, because the rules normally are good, they are here for something. But what I was saying here is that the rules are at the service of virtue. So it's not because you observe the rules that you're a good person. You become a good person when you develop the virtue. You know, the rule is the beginning of ethics. It's minimum ethical. It's the minimum ethical that is necessary to grow. But you have to, if you want to become a real human being, you have to practice virtue ethics, not rule-based ethics. I repeat, I'm not saying that rules are not good. I'm saying that rules always have to be at the service of virtue. And you have many people, they feel themselves perfect, even saints, because they follow the rules. And we have to tell them it's not true. The rule is just the beginning in your life. That's not the end. The end of life is the development of your personality. It's personal growth. And this can be achieved only through the development of virtues. You follow me? So we need to repeat this all the time to people. Virtue ethics is what we have to practice. Rule-based ethics, it's okay for children, but when you understand the rules, then after you have to go forward, you have to develop the virtues. Many people just stop at the rules, and they become hypocritical. You think, well, I'm a saint because I observe the rules. What's that? So holiness is not about observing rules. Holiness is about self-development. And this is a very different thing. And very often, if you're a saint, you know how to break the rules.
When you have to.
When you have to. Because you practice the virtue of prudence. And the virtue of prudence tells you, look, in that situation, you must not obey the rule.
Yeah, that's...
So the virtue gives you the capacity to break the rule when the rule has to be broken. If you have no virtue, specifically if you don't possess the virtue of prudence, you will not be able to break the rules when they have to be broken.
Yeah. I'm thinking about magic. I do close-up magic. And you have to master the rules of the mechanics of an effect. But you're never going to achieve greatness if you don't know when it's important to break the rules, because the rules are the starting point, not the finish line. They're the basic guardrails, if you will. But sometimes if the road twists and the guardrail goes straight, it's ridiculous to follow the rules. Same with acquiring skill as a musician. Yes, you have to learn the notes, you have to learn scales, and you have to become good. But sometimes improvisation requires some rule breaking, which is not the same as breaking the law, right? You're not breaking God's law here. We're talking about guidelines that have to be set aside. Is that a distinction to be made?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. We have to obey the rules, but the top rule is God's love for people. And you have to understand how to love people, and the rules very often just don't tell you how to do that.
What are your thoughts on or examples of contemporary church leadership inside the Catholic Church? Who do you look to as irrespective of temperament, someone who's speaking the truth in a simple way, someone who's acting as a prophet? The first one that comes to mind for me is Cardinal Robert Sarah of Guinea, Africa, a very quiet, seemingly shy man and yet he speaks boldly on important things today.
That's right. I know him personally.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I met him in Rome when I was giving a seminar on religious leadership 6 months ago. He was there and we talked, and he's Yeah, he's a very attractive personality because, as you say, he's very quiet. He had suffered a lot when he was in Africa. He's a man of experience. He's very loving, and he speaks the truth with courage. I think all of us were very different. And when you look at the three last popes that we have had, you see each one of them had his own specificity, but you see virtue in the three of them. You see a lot of virtue in the three of them. And of course, this also has to do with the temperament of each one of them. I mean, Jocko II, as we said, was a melancholic choleric, and we understand how he was behaving when we understand his temperament. And Benedict was obviously a phlegmatic person. He was a scientist, and we see how he was dealing with this. And he's also a saint. I'm convinced of that. And Francis is also a great saint. Francis is a man also who is he's a sanguine. He's from South America, and you have a lot of sanguine people there. And the way he communicates is the way that sanguine communicates. Certain people don't understand this because they are not sanguines. But we have to respect the way of being of each pope. I think if God has wanted Peter to be Francis, or Francis to be Peter, it's because he has something to tell humanity through him in the way he does things. And we have to learn ourselves just to forget about our own temperament and to love the temperament of other people, especially when these other people are bitter, have something to tell us. And all those people have been practicing the virtues. I mean, the three popes are very virtuous people on a very high level. And we have to be very grateful to God for the human level and spiritual level of the three last popes we have had.
What if we went back one to Paul VI, who, another saint? He seems like the classic Hamlet-like melancholic, prone to introspection, but also acted courageously when he needed to.
Yeah, I think that Paul VI suffered a lot. It was the crisis of the church. So he was in the very heart of it, and he understood what was happening, and he spoke about it. But he couldn't do much. But he offered his life to Christ, and he injured quite a lot. So that's why he is a saint. I mean, each moment in history requires a specific way of acting, and I think he did everything he could, and he did very well. That's why he's also a saint.
Very different personalities. Boy, it's interesting. And you keep going back to St. John the 23rd, another classic, I think, sanguine, love people, gregarious, love the party, love to raise a glass and use people's first name and kind of break protocol, and very friendly. And then before him, Pius the 12th, very kind of august and probably choleric. What's your read on Pius the 12th? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but based on the historical record.
I don't know much about those all those popes. I've been, of course, following very much the three last popes because they were those popes who had a big impact in my life. So I tried to understand them well. I'm not a historian. I just look at those popes I've known because I'm interested in them because they've had an impact on my life. And I've been trying to understand what is it that they want to tell me.
Yeah.
So that's why I know them well. But those were before John Paul II. I didn't know them at all. So I'm not. This is something that we have. This is the kind of questions we have to ask them to historians.
John Paul II. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm not a historian.
On our honeymoon, my wife and I got the Sposi Novelli blessing from John Paul II. That was quite a remarkable day, to say the least. Did you have any encounters with him? Did you meet John Paul II?
Yeah, I met him once in Rome, and we spoke a little bit. We spoke about a few minutes, and he was very quiet. He was speaking very slowly, and he was speaking in Russian.
In Russian?
Yeah, I spoke good Russian.
I did not know that he had mastered Russian. Wow.
Yeah, he was reading every day 15 minutes Russian. Every day.
That's phenomenal.
He was reading the gospel in Russian every day. You couldn't say he mastered Russian, but you could say that he spoke enough Russian in order to speak with people, and he spoke very well.
It's interesting that you think of a Pole wanting to read, in a sense, the language of his oppressors the Gospels in that language. That to me, that shows great magnanimity, because you might think he would have an allergy to Russian because of its association with the Soviet Union and with communism.
No, because he was like Solzhenitsyn. He understood the difference between Russian and communist. So he loved Russian culture. He knew all the Russian philosophers very well. He read them. Florensky, of course, Dostoevsky, Chekhov. He read Chadaev. He read
Soloviev?
Yeah, Soloviev, of course. He knew those people very well. So he read them a lot. He loved the Russian. His dream was to go to Russia. But he could not achieve that dream. But it was his dream. So you cannot say that he had... he loved Russians. Obviously, he hated communism because he hated ideologies. But he really loved people. And I think he understood well the Russians and loved them very much. I mean, do you remember after the war, he was translating for a Russian officer. He was helping a Russian officer in Warsaw or in Krakow, I don't remember, to translate material from Polish to Russian. So which means that already at that time, after the Second World War, he was capable of speaking Russian quite well, because he was serving as a translator for a Soviet officer. So which means that he spoke Russian. Yeah, he spoke Russian, and he loved Russians.
Alex, how did you become interested in leadership and teaching leadership skills in your systems? How did this all begin? Is this something you've been interested in since boyhood, or did you come to it as an attorney? How did this all start?
I was an attorney, so I was a lawyer, barrister in Finland. I was working there as a barrister. But then one day I was asked to give classes on the history of European integration at the university. And I had a lot of students there, some 50, 60 students. And I began to speak to them a lot about the founders of the European Union. And my students were very much amazed about those founders, people like De Gasperi, Adenauer, Jean Monnet, Robert Schuman. They were great people. They were incredible founders. Of course, what they did had little to do with what the European Union is now, but still they were incredible founders. And so my students were asking me a lot about human beings, about how you dream like they dream, and like they dreamt, how you transform your dreams into mission like they did. What's the difference between a value and character? What's the difference between temperament, character, virtues? So they were asking me a lot of questions related to human beings, to those great people. And then I understood that I had to give answers to them. And then I had education in philosophy. So this was for me a very good thing, because then I could come back to the good books and I could begin to write those answers down, and I discovered that this was leadership. And then I began to write books on leadership, and then I quit with my job as a lawyer, and I began to speak about leadership and to teach virtuous leadership all over the world. And now we have some 15 institutes, virtuous leadership institutes in the world, in 5 continents. So people like it, people want more of it. We have been speaking too much about technical leadership.
Yeah.
Now it's time to speak about fundamental leadership, which is to speak about character. And then we did that, and then it works very well, and all over the world, people want it, and they want more. And that's why I go on writing books. I've been now writing 4 or 5 books. So I don't stop writing books in order to have enough material to speak but to be able to answer the questions of people.
And you're going to be on the road, Vancouver, Phoenix? What are those dates? What are those events?
Yeah, on February 1st, Bishop of Phoenix, Homestead, invited me to be the keynote speaker at the men's conference.
Good man.
Men's conference. There should be some 2,000 men there.
Beautiful.
So I will be there in Phoenix on February 1st, Saturday. And I'll be very happy to meet a lot of people there.
Yeah, I spoke at that conference about 5 or 6 years ago. The men will love you, and you'll love them. It's a great event. I have a great respect for Bishop Thomas Olmsted, so that's great.
That works.
And anything else you want to let people know that if you're in America? No?
No, in America, I travel to the United States at least once a year, and we have very different people asking for education, virtuous leadership. In Canada also, we are developing a center very very much, all North America. And that's it. So in America, I think I presented to the U.S. Army in college. We presented also at the U.S. Navy college. So, I mean, the top leadership of the U.S. Army and Navy were interested in virtuous leadership. And I had a very good time with those people. And we had very good time with big corporations, top leadership of big corporations like CS Corporation, computer science, technology, with a lot of very different people in business, in education, in the universities, in the military. Everyone is interested in virtuous leadership. I think it's a time really to speak about it.
Well, the need is so great and so urgent. One last question about victory. When I'm at Mass and I hear the general intentions, and sometimes they'll mention we pray for our troops, our military, and they quickly jump to may they return home safely, which is wonderful. Of course, we want them to return home safely, but they often leave out may they be victorious, and maybe may they vanquish their enemies. And we're shy to talk about victory, but that's how you end the book. An agenda for victory. How is victory defined for a leader?
Well, the victory is the victory over yourself. It is a victory. It is that you are always in the move, always growing. I'm always saying that a leader is not someone that has achieved something. It is someone that is always, as the Latin people were used to say, the Romans, in via. In via, always on the move, always on the way. And you cannot say, now you got it. It's not. It's about personal growth, and this personal growth has no, as a starting point, but it has not ending point. So you have to be all the time moving and developing yourself, whatever your age is. So this is what, for me, is leadership. You're a leader if you're moving forward in your life as a spiritual being.
The website is hvli.com. .org?
Yes,
okay.
hvli.org.
Okay. See, by being corrected, I get to say it again. hvli.org. Alex Havard, thank you so much for joining us. I always learn a ton when you're on the show, so thanks for being a gift and for getting it across so clearly. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick. It was good to speak to you.
I end the show with "Be a saint. What else is there?" Can you lay that down for us in Russian? Be a saint. What else is there?
Будь святым. This means be a saint.
Be a saint. Okay, works for me. Awesome. What else is there? Alex Havard, God bless you richly. We'll talk again, I hope. This is the Patrick Coffin Show. As I intimated earlier in Russian, be a saint. What else is there? Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear, and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.